Okay, so welcome to those of you who just joined. We are just getting started. And tonight's topic is how to fix a flat tire. It's the most common repair problem for bicycles. And they usually happen at a time that's not terribly convenient. I guess flat tire is never convenient. So we're going to walk you through just how to fix that. We did a special fix flat class 2 weeks ago on how to patch a tube and how to put a boot into a tire that's been damaged, so it will temporarily get you home. And we're not going to be covering that tonight. So a little bit about Bike New York. We are a New York City-based nonprofit organization whose mission is to promote cycling as a practical, safe, healthy, and economic means of transportation and fun. We're best known for the 5-Borough Bike Tour and Bike Expo New York, which happens every year in the spring and also happens to be our biggest fundraisers. So both those events this year got canceled due to the coronavirus pandemic. And then we're also very well known for our free bike education programs, which provide classes and programming. In the last 3 years, at least 24,000, between 24,000 and 30,000 people a year have attended our classes or programs, and that's a lot. So if you can, please become a member or donate to Bike New York so that we can continue these programs. So tonight's class, we're going to cover how to prevent flat tires. We'll talk about some tools and items that you will need, especially for fixing flat tires out on the road when you're not at home. But the bulk of the presentation is going to be step-by-step instructions. Okay, so let's talk about preventing flat tires. So first thing is you want to keep your tires inflated within their pressure range. You can find the pressure range written somewhere on the side of the tire. It's going to say something like PSI or inflate to or maximum pressure. Oftentimes it will give a range and you should keep it within that range. If you go to the higher end of the range, you'll get a faster ride, but maybe a little bit more bumpy or vibrating because the tire is much harder. If you go to the lower end of the range, your ride will be maybe smoother and softer, but also a little bit more hard work because more of your tire is contacting the surface of the road. And you do need to check your inflation probably about once a week, if not more often. Second thing you can do is keep your tires in good condition. When they are starting to get dried out on the sidewalls or the tread is disappearing, those are good signs that it's time to replace the tire. If you see any signs of damage like a bulge, a cut, casing showing through, or the puncture resistant lining showing through, it's time to replace those tires. Now, if you just have some small sharp object go through, like a tack or something, that's not sufficient damage usually to cause the replacement of a tire. And then I always buy flat resistant tires that have a lining inside the tread, oftentimes made of Kevlar or other hard materials that prevent small sharp objects from coming through. Okay, so some items you're going to need. Make sure that you have the correct size of tube. Here's a tube from our track bike shop. And the bike industry is a little bit all over the place the way they size tubes. Some of the tubes or some of the tire sizes and wheel sizes are metric, like road bikes and hybrids are metric. A lot of mountain bikes come in either English or metric sizes. But your tube and tire size is going to be, it's going to look like a math problem. So this first one here is a mountain bike size tire. It's 26 inches, which refers to the diameter of the wheel. and 2, which would be about 2 inches, which refers to the width of the tire across. The same for like this road or hybrid type tire here. 700 would probably be about 700 millimeters, and then 32 would be the width. So generally you have to have that first number exactly the same. If your tire is 700, your tube that you buy has to be 700. It might be 27, you know, that'd be okay. Those are very close sizes. If your mountain bike tire is 26, you have to buy a 26-inch tire. Keep in mind, I'm sorry, tube. Keep in mind there are 2 different sizes of 26 just to make things confusing. There's an old obsolete wheel size that's not really manufactured anymore that's also 26. So you can always take your wheel, your bike into the bike shop, or just write down the number. And if you're going to like a Target or a Walmart somewhere to buy tubes. The second number, you do have a little bit of wiggle room. Like if I needed to buy a replacement tube and all the store had was 26 by 1.75, that would be fine. 26 by 2.1, that would be fine. If I was buying a road tube like this and my tire is 700 by 32 and the tube is 700 by 28, that's fine. But you don't want a huge difference in that second number. Like I wouldn't put a 700 by 18 in here. That might be a little bit too much space for that little skinny tube to fit. The other thing you need to know is what type of valve do you have? And there's Presta, which is a metal skinny valve that unscrews from the top. There's a cap over it like this. And then there's Schrader, which is the same type of valve that a car uses. They're very different types of valves. You can stick a Presta tube into the hole for a Schrader because it's a larger hole. But I usually use 2 of these little locking nuts, one on the inside and one on the outside, to hold that in place and to make sure that none of the tube tries to squeeze through that extra space when it's inflated. And then if you are using like a deep dish rim, you might need to know how long your Presta valve is. And of course, you're going to need pumps, and I keep 2 pumps. I keep a floor pump like this here. And this is one from Trek. It has a nice big gauge on it. I recommend pumps with gauges. And this pump is, if I can find the price, $40, not bad. All metal construction. Looks like a good quality pump. And then I keep a little frame pump on my bike. Some cyclists like to carry CO2 kit, carbon dioxide, which inflates your tubes very, very quickly. And even with mountain bikes and road bikes, but fat not use these CO2 inflators because they won't get close to inflating with a fat bike tire. So I myself prefer the frame pump because sometimes you can have a bad day or a bad week and you don't want 2 or 3 flat tires in one day and then run out of CO2. With my pump, I know that I always have a supply of air. And on a bike tour several years ago, which involved rail trails and a canal towpath, my tires, which must have been worn worse than I thought they were, they looked okay, but I got 12 flat tires in the space of 3 days and literally wore out my pump, inflating tires and patching tubes. So if you want to do your flat tire repair on the road, I recommend carrying a little kit with you, and I keep a kit in a little seat wedge bag like this. And Trek stores have one nice little bag about the same size that I use. And this one's 28 bucks. So I keep a little tiny Presta adapter if you have to use like a gas station air hose. You screw this adapter on the top of your Presta valve, and it makes the valve the same size as a Schrader. I keep my spare tube. I keep a pair, 2 or 3 tire levers. I carry a patch kit. Now I don't patch right away unless I'm with somebody who wants to patch it for me, but I do save my tubes and I patch them at home. But I do carry a patch kit in case I get a second flat tire, then I can patch with tubes. I keep a multi-tool, which generally is not too handy for repairing a flat tire, but you never know when something comes loose or needs an adjustment. And then I keep a small rag to keep all that stuff from rattling around and making vibrating noises while I ride. And I can also clean them down. A couple of other things you might need depending on the type of bike you have. If you have a bike with bolt-on hubs, like internally geared hubs, fixed gear, single-speed beach cruiser, you're going to need either an adjustable wrench like this, and one with a little 6-inch handle should get the job done. Or 15 or 17 millimeter mechanics wrench. These do come in stubby sizes if you want to stick them in your little seat wedge bag. And then if you have a bike with coaster brake, like a kid's bike, beach cruisers have those, or some other specialty types of brakes, you might need a screwdriver to disconnect the brake connection to the rest of the bike. That would be for the rear wheel, maybe sometimes for the front wheel too, for drum brakes and such. If you are doing this at home, please don't use sort of adjustable pliers, grippy type wrenches to remove the nuts that hold the wheels on. They just tear up the nuts and then make it harder to use an actual correct, accurate tool to remove those nuts. And then please don't use butter knives, screwdrivers as tire levers. We'll show you how to use the tire levers later on, but butter knives, screwdrivers really can tear up the tires or punch a hole in the tube that you're trying to put back in. Okay, so let's go through some step-by-step instructions here. And this is just for changing a flat. If you are replacing the tires, the instructions are pretty much the same. In the slide deck I'm going to show you here, we leave the tires on the wheel. If you're just changing a flat, you don't need to take the tire off the wheel. Okay, so darn it, we have a flat tire. I ruin my ride or make it stop, and it doesn't ruin your ride, fix it. And generally, I can fix a flat tire in about 10 to 20 minutes. So if you're using a multi-geared bike with a derailleur, and most of the time your flat tire is going to happen on the rear tire because that's the tire that carries more weight and does more work. So we're just going to assume a rear flat tire here. Changing the front tire is very similar, except you don't have to deal with the gear system. So first thing you do is when you have a flat is if you have a system like this, shift the chain to the smallest cog or all the way over to the right. That'll make it much, much easier to get the wheel back on the bike when you're finished fixing your flat tire. Then you're probably going to want to open up the brakes, and road bikes have a little lever usually here that you flip up and it will spread the brake arms out a little bit. If you have V brakes or what are called cantilever brakes, which are kind of an obsolete type of brake now, you have to separate the two brake arms. With this, whoa, what happened here? Okay, let's go back up. I grab a hold of this sort of curved metal piece. I squeeze or pull the brake arms together, and then I slide that metal piece through this little arm here. There's a slot where the cable can pop through. Generally, if you have a flat tire, especially on a road bike, you can often get the wheel out without opening up the brakes. With mountain bikes, you probably do need to open up the brakes, though. The tire is just too wide to pass between the brake pads. So then you want to open your quick release levers on the back wheel. That's all you need to do, and the wheel will come out. If it's the front wheel, though, you're probably going to have some safety tabs on the fork that prevent the wheel from just falling out. You're going to have to unscrew the opposite side of the lever. There's a little thumb screw there, and you just unscrew that a little bit. You don't have to take it off, but get it loose enough to where the quick release can clear those dropout safety tabs. When I say dropouts, that's this part where the wheel attaches to the frame or the fork. And then I should also mention, if you have disc brakes, you don't need to do anything. The disc brakes generally clear. They don't have to worry about the tire clearance getting around the pads. And then I just generally lift the bike up. Sometimes I have to pop the wheel out, and I clear the chain around the cogs, and the wheel is free of the bike. Some people want to turn their bike upside down, pull the wheels off when they do this, and that's fine too. So this is where you're going to need to use your tire levers. And when you're removing the tube or the tire, you always start opposite from the valve stem. If you try removing the tire from the rim right near the valve stem, your life is going to be difficult. So start on the other side from the valve stem. So then your tire levers have two ends, and one end has a little kind of spade or spoon shape to it, and the other end has a hook. So what you want to do is you want to take the spade or spoon in, and you're going to pull the tire back with one hand and sort of dig that spade underneath the edge of the tire. The edge of the tire is called the bead. There's actually a piece of cable embedded in the tire, and that's what holds the tire to the rim, is the bead when you inflate the tire. So you're going to have it straight up, as you can see, and you stick it in there, and you might have to use some force to get it underneath the bead. And then I do a motion where the spade is underneath the bead, and I just kind of pry it over the edge of the rim like this. And you might have to use some strength. You don't really hold this like a pencil or a pen. You're often holding it like with your fist. And then what you do is you still have the spade underneath the edge of the tire. You've just pried one short section over the rim. What I try and do is slide the lever underneath the tire towards me. I'm just using my body as kind of a backstop for the tire. Now, sometimes the tire or the bead is really tight on that rim, even though it's totally flat. So you might need to use a second tire lever, and that's what the hook is for. So I've pried one part of the bead off, and it was a little too tough. So I hooked the lever onto a spoke, and I take the second tire lever, and I go back to this step, and maybe only 2 inches away or so from the first tire lever. I hook it under the bead, and I pry it over, and then I try this step again, trying to slide the lever towards me underneath the tire. I've oftentimes had to go use a third lever because the tire was just so tight. But 2 usually does it, 3 definitely does it. So what you're going to do is you're going to go all the way around, and you're going to pry the bead or slide the bead off the rim all the way around. And that gives you access to the tube, and you can reach inside that now removed section of the tire and pull the tube out. And again, you start on the opposite side of the valve, take the valve out last. Now I'm leaving these tires on because I'm just changing a flat. So the other side of the tire that you did not remove with tire levers, just go ahead and leave that on. I should mention some tires, like inexpensive mountain bike, the tires are so loose that the whole thing often just falls off and you have to put it back on, but whatever. So I pulled the tube out and I want to kind of leave it in the same orientation and direction that it was when it was inside the tire. And I just lay it down and I'm going to pump up the tube and try to find where the leak is at. If I can hear a leak, I can identify where in the tire maybe a sharp object came through. Now, a couple things to note here. If your flat tire was caused by sudden blow up, for whatever reason, that can be caused by different things, either too much air in the tire, or somehow the tire failed, maybe because it was too old or damaged. Or another reason is that the tire wasn't mounted evenly, and when you went to pump it up, part of the bead came out of the rim, and all that air inside the tube is looking for a place to escape, and of course it just blows up. So you can't really rescue the tube if it blows up. It's got a big massive hole or tear in it. There's no patching that. But I always inspect the tire, even if I think I know where the source of the leak was, and maybe I found a piece of glass or a little tack or something right there. I still inspect the entire tire just to see if there's anything else in there. There might be another piece of glass stuck inside the tread that's trying to work its way through. Remember I told you about my misadventure with the 12 flat tires? Well, one of them was I had fixed the flat and thought I had located the source of the puncture. Put a patched tube back in, but little did I know there was a second object inside the tire somewhere else. So really inspect the entire tire. And then you also want to inspect the rim. Just make sure that the rim strip, which is a piece of cloth or rubber that covers the ends of the spokes, to make sure that that's in place and that it's not damaged. Okay, so there's a couple different types of flat tires that you can tell kind of what happened. So if you pump it up and you see a small hole where air is escaping, that's obviously a sharp object that came through your tire. If you have two small holes next to each other, maybe ½ an inch apart, that's caused by riding tires that are underinflated and they're too soft. And you hit some kind of hard object like the edge of a curb, pothole, a rock, and what happens is the tire compresses against the rim and it pinches the tube against the rim in two little places. So it looks like a snake bit your tube. I already talked about the giant hole or tear. And then if you have a hole that's right next to where the valve goes into the tube, that's also not repairable. You're not going to be able to get a patch right there attached to the, next to the valve stem. Okay, so I've checked everything. I have a good tube, or at least I think it's good. And what you're going to do is slightly inflate the tube just so it holds its shape. It shouldn't be totally flat like when it was folded. But you don't want to put so much air in there that it starts to get like a balloon, because you won't be able to stuff it back inside the tire. It'll be way too big. So usually with a big floor pump like that and a road tube, it's 1 or 2 pumps does it. If it's a mountain tube, you might need 3 or 4 pumps. Same for a hybrid tube. If you're using your little frame pump, it's probably going to be several pumps to get just enough air. And then putting the tube back in is the opposite of when you took it out. So you start with the valve stem, and you want to put the tube in the side that you removed the tire from. So the side of the tire that's exposed and off the rim. If you try doing it on the other side, it's going to be impossible to get the tube underneath the bead, underneath the part of the tire that's already on the rim. So go in the open side. So put the valve in the valve hole first, push it all the way down in there, and then start stuffing the tube inside the tire all the way around. And that's pretty easy to do unless you overinflated it. If you've gotten all the way around, you still have 6 inches of tube that you can't stuff in there, let some air out and do it over again, or stuff that last bit of tube back in. Excuse me. Then what you want to do is kind of push the tire and the tube over so the tube is resting over the rim. And you don't want any of the tube exposed outside of the rim, because as you start to install the tire, it can get pinched there, and then that will cause another puncture. So the next step is to, and this part can be challenging, is to put the tire back on the rim, or at least that one side of the tire. And again, start at the valve stem, and what I usually do is I push the valve up and in a little bit. I use my thumbs and I push tire over the rim, being away from the valve stem on both sides. So it's pretty easy to get it all the way around until you get to that last little bit. Maybe the last 6, 8, 10 inches that are not yet mounted on the rim. Now, if less expensive mountain bike tires, hybrid tires, usually you can mount it back on the rim all the way around with your fingers, not using any tools. So, but really try to use your fingers. As you see here, I'm using both hands. This hand here is pulling the tire back, and this thumb is trying to push the bead over the edge of the rim. So sometimes the tire, though, is very tight and you can't use your hands. So what you want is use one tire lever. And you're going to notice there's a part of the tire, the bead, where it crosses over the rim. So here the tire is installed, and here it's not installed. And what I do is I take my tire lever, and this time the spade is pointing outside. And I pull back on the tire, and I insert the tire lever between the rim on the inside and the tire. And what I'm going to do is work ahead. One hand is working ahead of the tire lever and it's pulling back on the tire. And the other hand is pulling the tire lever towards me. And again, you have to use some muscle and some strength for this oftentimes. So I'm grabbing the tire lever with my fist as I pull it towards me. What you don't want to do is stick your tire lever up inside underneath this exposed part of the bead here, because you can puncture that by pinching it between the rim and the tire lever. So try to avoid doing that. So there I have it on. Most tires will go on with just this method if you can't get them on. Let me show you one other technique here that I said not to do, and this is kind of your last resort. So if the technique I showed you with the tire lever doesn't work, you can try prying the tire over, but really this should be your last resort. So I stick the tire lever up in here with the spade side facing the rim. And then what I do is, before I try prying it over, I slide it over to where it's just crossed over, and then I pry it over. If you try to get this much tire over the rim in one bite, you're probably going to cause a pinch flat or break your tire lever. So I do a little at a time. I stick it up in there, slide it over, and then pry it upwards to try and pry the tire over the edge of the rim. That might get an inch or two, and then I do it again. Stick it up in there, slide it over, pry it up over the rim. That's your best shot at not puncturing the tire or the tube if you have a really, really, really tight tire. Okay, so let's talk about putting the wheel back on. So what I do for the back wheels, I put the top half of the chain that was going over the cog, I put that on the smallest cog. And I grab the back of the derailleur here. There's a little tab back there that's usually not very dirty. That helps me handle the derailleur. And then I kind of have to guide the tire, and I haven't inflated it yet. I guide the tire between the brake pads. And if you have disc brakes, you have to guide the disc rotor between the brake pads. And then I'm going to guide the quick release axle or the quick release into the dropout here. This is much easier on the front wheel. And then please make sure that you close your quick release. So most quick releases say close on one side and open on the other side. So this quick release here, when it's in the closed position, it says close on the outside. If you see open on the outside, your quick release is not in the right position. When it is closed, you should try rotating the quick release around. If you can rotate it around, your quick release is too loose. So open it up again, and on the other side where that little nut is, this thing, this little finger nut, you just tighten that, and you tighten it to the point where when you close the lever halfway, you start to get some resistance. Of course, not all bikes use quick releases. If you do have what are called nutted axles, most of the time all you have to do is loosen the nuts that hold those wheels on. You don't have to take the nuts completely off. Those are something you don't want to lose and have fall into the grass or fall into a sewer drain or something. And with the nutted axle, you tighten it clockwise on both sides. So once I have the bike, the wheel in the bike and it's secured, that's when I pump it up. And as I pump it up, I am going slowly. Sometimes you'll hear a snapping noise as the bead pops into place. You want to just watch the tire as you're pumping it up, because some tires are kind of really loose on the rims, and you don't want the bead unseating itself in one spot when you've got like 40 pounds of pressure in there, because all of a sudden the tire will come loose and the tube will blow out of there and blow up. So if you do see that happening, like the tire unseating itself from part of the rim, I just immediately start letting air out of the valve. Take the hose off take the pump off the valve and let air out, and then reseat the tire. And then please make sure that you connect your brakes or release back in position here. Don't forget to do that. A lot of people forget to do it. A lot of people forget to check the tire. That slide where I was checking the tire, people forget to do that. And then they put a good tube in a tire that's got a sharp object embedded in it. And they get another flat tire right away. And then you're done. Spin the wheel, make sure it's not rubbing the brake pads. Take it for a quick little ride and then be on your way. I do save the punctured tube, and I patch tubes at home unless I get another flat on the road, and then I patch it as I need a new tube. And that is it. That is how you fix a flat tire. I should mention that we will send a recording, and I think we have a video on our website of how to fix a flat tire by our former bike fleet manager, Jerry. So you will be getting those sometime tomorrow in a follow-up email from our communications staff. And that's it. I'm going to open it up for questions now. I'm going to let people unmute themselves. See if we have in chat. Okay, so Jeff is asking, since you're in a bike shop, would you please share an update on the status of bike shop inventory? I told one of the staff members here that this question comes up on almost every class, regardless of the topic. Do you want to give them an update? Yeah, introduce. This is introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Mike.
What's your job here?
I'm the service manager here at Trek 72nd Street. Bikes are very, very hot commodity right now, and very high demand, very short supply. Unless you're looking for an e-bike or a nice high-end, relatively available. As far as the rest of the bikes, we're hoping to see some stopper, but more than likely it's going to be March and April of next year before shops will be full again. But there are bikes slowly trickling in, so I would encourage everyone to just be patient and call your local shops and see, because everybody has bikes on order. So just give them a call and see when things come in. And that's the best update.
Is that a lot of the phone calls you're getting is, do you have bikes?
Yep, almost 90% of our phone calls are, do you have them? Okay, what about the next one up, and so forth.
Yeah. That's 90% of my customer service right now is winter, and the answer is not for a long time. Thanks, Mike.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, other questions about fixing flat tires? So Randall asks, when fixing a back tire, do you need changing because of messing with the chain? Generally not. That's why I said make sure before you take the wheel off, shift the chain into the smallest cog. And then when you go to put it back on, put the chain back on that smallest cog. And then, if you are laying your bike down, lay the bike down on the left side, or the opposite side from the derailleur. The only other things that might be different is like if you have a through axle type of quick release, sort of like a quick release, but it's a much wider piece that slides through the hub, and then you screw it in using the handle, and it screws in the opposite side. So make sure you know how to use your through axle if you have through axle wheels. Getting back to Randall's question, if you have anything like a single speed or some of the older bikes with horizontal or semi-horizontal dropouts, make sure that the wheel is centered in the frame, because you can get the wheel sort of diagonal in those horizontal dropouts, and you can even tighten them up that way. With the vertical dropouts in modern bikes, you don't have to really worry about that. But you don't want your chain kind of engaging the cog at a funny angle because the wheel went in crooked. So Nicole asks, does the tutorial on your site also include instructions for disc brakes? So Nicole, I'm not sure what you're referring to is it how to take the wheel out or reinstall the wheel if you have disc brakes? Because I'm not really covering any like disc brake repair in this or maintenance in this class. Really, if you have disc brakes, you don't have to like open them up or do anything with them, because the disc is not part of the rim or the tire assembly the way the rim brakes are. So you don't necessarily have like tire clearance issues. You can just open the quick release or take your through axle out if you have a through axle, and they'll should just pop right out. It's a little more tricky getting back in. You want to make sure that the disc rotor isn't bumping into the disc brake caliper or bumping into the pads. I once knocked a pad loose, struggling to get a wheel back on, and then I had to fiddle around getting the pad put back in place. But generally, it's pretty easy. Let's see. Somebody asked a question, do you recommend glue or glueless patch? So this is from DL. Now, I have not had good luck with glueless patches, but other people report that they work just fine. So I don't know what my problem was. I always use glued patches. Now, one of the things you have to watch out for with the glued patches is when you open up the little tube of glue that's in a patch kit, that tube is sealed up and you have to puncture the seal with a little sharp thing that's inside the cap. And then you do your patching job. And what I found is when you put the cap on and it's maybe that patch kit sits around for months without getting used again, is the glue dried out. For some reason, those caps don't really, the glue from evaporating and drying out. So before you go on your long 100-mile solo ride, check your glue and make sure that it's still kind of in liquid form, or you could be in for an unpleasant surprise. Okay. So Jeff asks, for the front, what guidance do we have for how to put the wheel back on the frame? Assuming you didn't remove the quick release, generally the quick release goes on the left side. Some people with disc brakes now are putting the quick release lever on the right side because apparently, and I don't know how this happens, somebody got their quick release lever caught in the disc rotor and brought their bike to a sudden screeching halt. Some tires have a directional to them, so pay attention to that. Otherwise, if you're not sure the rim, the hub, if it has like a brand label on it, you're looking down at that brand label, you should be able to read it left to right. And that's the correct way to install the wheel back on the bike. You do have to have the quick release or the axle nuts loose enough to clear the safety tabs that are on the floor. Just mold it into the dropouts. And the quick release has to be loose enough to clear those so that your wheel is tight. Otherwise, the front wheel is much simpler to deal with in terms of getting on and off. Let's see. Any suggestion about the best type of patch to use for repairing small holes in the tube, especially when you're out riding around and need to fix it? Oh, okay. You know, the patches with the glued patch kits, they're all the same. One brand is pretty much the same as the other. We have Miles. Do you recommend turning bikes upside down when changing flats, or is that a personal preference? I think it's a personal preference. I leave my bikes, as you saw from the picture, you know, more or less upright, because I have stuff on the handlebars, things that I don't want to get banged up, like my computer and my bell. And so I don't turn the bikes upside down. Other people find that it seems like you have to have 14 hands to hold the bike and remove the wheel, manipulate the chain and derailleur. So they would prefer to have the bike upside down. So the bike supports itself and they can just worry about the wheel and the chain and stuff like that. I guess I don't need my mask on right now. Other questions? And if you want to ask a question verbally, you are welcome to unmute yourself and just ask the question verbally. You don't have to put it in the chat if you don't want. If a frame pump doesn't have a gauge, how do we use our hand or fingers to feel for proper inflation? That's a good question. I give the tires a squeeze like this, kind of on each side with my full hand, palm and 4 fingers. And the tire should be like pretty close to rock hard. It should be extremely firm. If you feel any sponginess, your hand can squeeze into the tire and it has some give to it, you need to put more air in. If your pump doesn't have a gauge, you can also get, I think they make the pen gauges, which are pretty compact for bike tires. I wouldn't go to AutoZone and get one of those pen gauges because car tires are very low pressure. They're only like 32 pounds. So the gauge doesn't really measure, say, a road bike pressure, which can be 120 or 150 pounds. Any other questions? All right, well, I'm going to say goodnight to everybody. Thank you for joining us, and I want to thank the Trek store on 72nd Street for hosting us and for giving us some objects for show and tell. As I said, you will be hearing from us tomorrow with a follow-up email. Have a good night, and you don't have to ever use this tutorial. Take care, everybody. All right, thanks a lot. I'm glad you were able to